Well, good morning and cheers, everyone. I am going to pose a question here, and I think you already know what that question is because it'll probably be on the title. This is why fear God? These ideas only come up to me once in a while I'm always thinking about them, but I bite my tongue when it comes to making videos because for those who have watched my channel for a while, you'll know that I'll go through little phases where I'll talk about religion and then not talk about religion for a while. Generally, I avoid the subject because it brings out too many negative emotions in people, and I don't want to attack people directly for what they believe. And I feel like when I make a video talking about, the problems with Christianity or religion in general, people take it very personal and, assume that I'm saying that if you believe this, you're an idiot, and that's just not the case. I did feel that way years ago. And over the years, I've learned to become more accepting and understanding. This is only through my own research. Instead of casting religion aside like I did when I was young and saying, these are just idiots who just believe anything they're told, I met many good, intelligent Christians, and I asked myself, why are good, intelligent, aware people believing these things? And not just the ones that were raised to believe it, but the ones who, say, find Christ later. And so I began to have a newfound respect for that, understanding not that it's the true path for everyone that they found, but that for them it works. But then when I bring up that, it becomes an issue of, no, this is, for them it's the only path, so everyone else is wrong. And that's why I speak out against it. Not because Christians believe in Christ as being the only one path to God. That's not the issue. The issue is how they view others and how they treat others because of what they believe. And I hope that makes sense. In other words, standing up for the little guy who can't defend himself. And Christianity is, to a lot, it's a plague. It's something that needs to be overcome. And I've learned that, at least in my opinion, that that's not true. Religion doesn't need to be overcome. Dogmatic theology needs to be overcome. But the belief system doesn't have to go away for that. You just have to learn to reinterpret what you're reading. But I hear these things like, I'm a God-fearing person, and I'm a God-fearing man, blah, blah, blah. And one of these comments I ran into yesterday, and it got me thinking again, of course, is, why do you fear God? What is it that you fear? When I woke up this morning, I had that thought in my head, and I thought, nobody fears God. They fear death and suffering. So by fearing God, what they really mean is that they're fearing where they will go if they don't love God, which is, let's say, hell. Hell is suffering. And to me, hell is a symbol for suffering here on earth. I don't believe in an eternal damnation. It doesn't jive with nature. It doesn't jive with anything that we know. In fact, it doesn't even jive with the Bible itself. There's no real straight-cut passage that says, if you do this and this and this, then this is what's going to happen to you, this is where you're going to burn, this is what it looks like. It's merely a collection of ideas about negativity and fire and Venus and Satan and the devil. But setting all that aside, because that's not worth a debate, when we really look at it, what is fear of God? It's fear of death and retribution. Now, if a person's living correctly, they shouldn't fear anything, especially not God. If let's say a Christian who says, I'm a God-fearing Christian, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean that a person knows in their heart that if they do something wrong, that they're going to suffer, that they'll be punished? With a parent, if you make a mistake, we all know that the worst thing you can do as a parent is beat your child when he makes a mistake. So most parents would be more likely to give them a slap on the wrist, or at least show them where they made the mistake rather than just saying, well, you're punished. And this is why I think that hell is such a ridiculous notion to most people, is because hell is like saying, well, you might make a mistake and you might not, but if you make the right mistakes, you'll go here. And this is where you'll spend eternity, and there's nothing people could fear more than just eternal suffering. But, even if that were true, at a point, that suffering is going to become neutral, because there's nothing to compare that suffering to. Let me give you an example. Let's say there was a hell, and then we all died, there was a rapture, and a bunch of people went off to hell, and we're like, oh no, bummer, we're in a lake of fire, and we began burning for eternity, okay? Unless they took a break from that pain and that suffering and said, okay, now we're going to give you guys some, a nice weekend vacation out here in hell, and you guys can have some water and some food and stuff. Okay, now back to suffering. As silly as that sounds, that's how I view everything. Without having the contrast, there is no suffering. If all you do is just burn in a lake of fire, let's say, eventually that will become the norm. And over a period of time, look at how quickly we adapt over a couple of years to things in just our lives here. Imagine if there was an afterlife of burning. Eventually you'd just be burning. It wouldn't matter. And you're not learning any lessons from it, like when you get a slap on the wrist. And if hell was a place to learn a lesson, then after hell there would be something else. And this is why many cultures didn't believe in a hell as much as a limbo in between, or whatever they call that. I can't think of the word right now, but when you're in that period in between, and you're able to consider the things that you've done in your life and whatnot. Any of that's possible. But I guess what I'm saying is that God-fearing means hell-fearing. That doesn't mean God-fearing to me. When people talk about God being something to fear, I just find that to be the most ludicrous thing, because it's really just a reflection of our fear of dying and not knowing where we're going. It's not fear of God, it's fear of the devil, right? I mean, does God punish? Does God choose? Well, maybe for some, but that debate, that argument isn't even worth having. So with Christians, I tend to just bite my tongue and move along most of the time. 99% of the time when I see a Christian comment that talks about how, well, there's retribution here, there's retribution there, in hell, I say, the only retribution is right here if we don't make the right decision to, live together. I feel like this life is ignored too much by the religious who believe that the afterlife is all that matters. And even if they're right, even if that's true, we all still have to live now. So think about this, if we're saying that this earth here doesn't matter, it's all about the afterlife. Well, in order for our future generations to understand that, we have to have a good life here. Because without a life where a person can develop and grow and learn, then they're going to be constantly struggling to survive. People who struggle to survive don't have a lot of time for extracurricular activities. And I think that all of us struggle in one way or another. But the idea of fearing something that we can't understand, I think, is probably just inherent within mankind. Anything that we don't know is there, we fear. It's is fear of God just a xenophobia? In the sense, just like not knowing another culture and fearing it because it's something we don't understand. I have no fear. It's the one thing that I can say that, while we need balance between, happiness and sadness, and we have all these emotional states and different positives and negatives, when it comes to fear, there's no place for it. Unless you're running from a tiger who's trying to eat you, or, avoiding a falling wall or something, There's fear that protects us, but there's also unnecessary fear that just destroys us. And looking through history, one doesn't even have to debate the impact of the idea of something like hell and what it's done through history to so many cultures. so many people have been maimed and killed in the name of religion, burned, and it's not a matter of ever helping that person. You see what I mean? If a person were to come forward and to tell the state, say hundreds of years ago in medieval Europe or whatnot, say, well, I don't believe this. And the state says, well, you have to believe that. That's the state belief. The person said no, so they burned him at the stake as an example. Are they burning that person or killing that person in order to help the person? Absolutely not. So what is the purpose of humans taking on God's job? In other words, if a Christian says, well, you don't believe me, so you're going to be burned. This is the ultimate sin, if there ever was one, to take, it's like taking on God's job yourself and saying, well, we'll take care of these people for you. What it really is having somebody in society that disagrees with you means, you have to abolish them because they're going to influence others to think and speak out against the state or against the religion. And being the person I am, I try to be as tolerant as I can to all people, but at the same time, looking through history, I see how religion has influenced and shaped our lives, as well as how greed and what we call evil and ignorance has shaped the world that we live in. And we can't just ignore that, or else our future generations are going to look back on us as the fucking Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. We're going to be the Dark Ages here, and we think that we're so enlightened, we think that we have so much going for us. But how long will any of this endure? And what values have we really set up today that generations in the future could understand? If we take the idea of retribution and understand really what it means to sin or to do wrong, my belief is that these are things we feel in our heart are harmful to everyone. Everyone. Not just ourselves, and not just offensive to God or offensive to the universe. Because the universe doesn't take offense. But we know in our hearts when we're being offensive to ourselves, and that is being offensive to the universe, if that makes sense. I don't think that mankind can ever write a book that will explain these things. I don't think that any group will ever be able to pinpoint all these ideas and pin them down and say this is what's true and this is what's not. But there seems to be a universal belief that karma will take place one way or another. And some people believe that it's a direct karma. If you commit bad in this world, you will suffer in the afterlife. And maybe so. Maybe so. Even if that were true, let's say for a minute that Christians are right and there is a hell, I think that it would have to break down a step further and say, okay, so there's this hell. What really sends you to this hell? And what is really a sin? People will say that if you say certain words, then you're going to burn in eternal hellfire. That's just ludicrous to me. I guess we all have to make sense of it in our own way, but the fear of God merely is the fear of death and the fear of the unknown. That's how I see it. Take care, everybody.